So our approach is very clinical based. So our patient demographic are patients who have a diagnosis of obesity, which is um, either diagnosed with a BMI greater than 30 or a diagnosis of overweight with
Mm,
a weight related like health conditions such as high blood pressure, high cholesterol, type 2 diabetes, obstructive sleep apnea, or they've either had, and that's a being classified as overweight is with or for our criteria is a BMI greater than 27.
mm.
And then those who have a BMI less than 27, we will still consider them if they've had a previous diagnosis of the aforementioned ones that I just mentioned, up to or as low as a BMI of 22. But we're really treating this as a metabolic disease, and so we're trying to improve patients who have these chronic diseases, and so we follow a pretty strict criteria.
Mm.
Because I know there's a lot of demand for patients who don't fall into this category, um, who are still seeking the medication, but that's not our patient population.
Do,
Got
do
it.
you think there's still a stigma to it? I think so many people have
Definitely.
like, especially with the GLP-1s and everything else. I think there's a huge stigma to the idea of getting chemical help for a huge subset of America. Their mindset is, okay, I have to diet, I have to work out, and that's the only way, and anything else is cheating. If that makes sense.
Totally. Oh yeah, definitely. I mean, it's funny, and I definitely want to have Sina share his recent story that he had when he went to go see his dermatologist with
Mm,
the medical assistant of the nurse in the room. But um, there is a lot of stigma, not only around obesity care, but just um, patients with obesity as a whole. So, I mean, if you again, like clinically, we treat and diagnose obesity as a chronic illness, just as we do with high blood pressure and diabetes. But people who are on type 2 diabetes meds or high blood pressure medications don't receive the same stigma that individuals who have obesity are who are on these GLP-1 medications. They like for some reason society always sees it as cheating or taking a
Look,
shortcut or
I'll add to that. Like,
mm.
I have high cholesterol. Okay, so this is genetic for me. I live, by all medical considerations, I have adopted all of the appropriate lifestyle modifications. Right, I work out, I eat an appropriate diet, nutritious, and I still have my LDLs and my total cholesterol like through the roof. Right,
What,
so I
what?
take
Just out of morbid
medication. I go to the
curiosity,
doctor.
what number is that? Like how high is it? What's through the roof?
I'm like a high
Oh
200s
wow. Okay.
um, in cholesterol, and I'm a 175 my LDL last time I had that checked, right?
Okay.
Which is like very high.
My
So
LDL was 201,
it's
just for perspective. Yeah.
that's
Wow.
high. I mean, and I have LP little a, so I have like the genetic the
Oh wow.
genetic molecule that would like lead to more of these like atherosclerotic lesions. And so basically, when I have this, I go get a blood test, and the doctor goes, we this is what we see. Here's the prescription. Have a nice day. See you in a year, right? But if a patient goes in with obesity, right, which is another metabolic condition, it's like, well, let's get you on X, Y, or Z diet first, or have you tried, this,
Yeah.
you know, regimen or calorie restriction or things like that. Whereas actually, there is a greater correlation in patients that have obesity, like a genetic correlation, than there is in patients who have cardiovascular disease. So it's to say
Mm.
that your lifestyle modifications can actually have a better positive effect on a patient with cardiovascular disease than they can on a patient with obesity, but because you're fighting a bigger uphill genetic battle if you have obesity, right? But they are treated oppositely in our medical system, right? One is like, yeah, here's your meds, have a nice day. And the other one's like, well, what are you going to cheat? And that's not to say that like all physicians or all of the medical community looks at it this way, but what's happening in this GLP-1 era, this is a metabolic health revolution because of the things that you said, Chris. You notice suddenly satiety, right? Your food hunger signals all of a sudden go
Hmm.
down. Obesity is a very, 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 very complex disease, right? It is a multifaceted and multifactorial etiology that would lead to the development of this disease. It's not just like genetics done, right? There's genetics, there's hormones, there's socioeconomics involved, there's psychology, there's culture, there's traumas. I mean, there's so many elements that could kind of work together or against each other to lead a patient down a particular path to reach a BMI that would be considered unhealthy.
Yeah.
And BMI is a very broken metric as well. you know, there are patients with really high BMIs that have a great metabolic health outcome, and there are patients like me who, like, I have actually, if you look at my labs, poor metabolic health, but I have a low BMI.
Right.
So I think in this era, what's beautiful is GLP-1s are illuminating what a condition that has been kept in the darkness for so long, that is being, you know, it's been stigmatized. There's so much preconceived thoughts or biases, right, about this disease. And so, yes, it's like eat less and move more, eat less and move more, right? I mean, the amount of times that we put up content trying to support our patients in better understanding their health conditions and solutions, that I see somebody leave something to the likeness of like, why don't you try putting the fork down? Here's your new prescription. You
Right.
know,
Yeah.
That's
just, like,
exactly what I wanted to touch
pure
on.
stigma and hatred. And we feel now like ultra responsible. Like GLP-1s, what they are, they're a catalyst for a metabolic health revolution that's happening. If you don't see it that way, there's either a stigma that you're really closely tied to, or you're not paying attention. So it's an exciting time, I think. Like, this is going to be, I think 5 to 10 years from now, we're going to look back at these years as an absolute pivoting point in health, but in metabolic health specifically. It's an absolute revolution.
So let's talk. So you guys started the company how long ago?
The company was started about 13, 14 months ago, maybe.
Okay.
And we began to develop it as a California medical corporation. Right? We were just going to be seeing patients in the state of California. Dr. Weiss is going to handle a lot of that. But what became of Fridays was, once we began to gather information, the due diligence process to figure out what we were going to become, right? We realized our chief medical advisor, like one of our senior clinical advisor, her name is Dr. Holly Lofton. She is the director of the weight medicine clinic at NYU Langone's School of Medicine. I mean, she is an absolute maven, and she's been in a member of the STEP trials, the trials for Novo Nordisk that was looking into semaglutide, which is like Wegovy and Ozempic. You know, these are early clinical trials for these medications. So she is our chief clinical advisor. And as we began to discuss with her, she's in Manhattan, we're in California, right? And what became clear was, where we live on the coasts, there's not an access to care issue, right? Generally speaking, I mean, I'm sure you guys know, you could probably go somewhere within 5 miles of where you live and get access to a GLP-1 medication like that. It's the middle of the country, the places in the country where obesity is greater than 40, in some places greater than 50% of the population is suffering with this disease, where even if you found out that these solutions existed, you couldn't access the medications because there isn't a provider. There's less than 1% of American physicians are obesity medicine trained. So we went from this California corporation 14 months ago, our plan. We quickly learned through Dr. Lofton that we need to solve access to care. That's a much bigger problem in parts of the country that we don't live and we don't work. How do we solve that? Telemedicine, right?
Wow, yeah.
How can we bring the provider to the person who has the problem but can't find the solution?